The other problem is that one of the more powerful. Okay, so this is the floor that I really wanted you to see. I'm just gonna let it play a little bit. What do you notice?
Lots of little red diamonds.
Yeah.
Everything has a jug in front of it, so no one can attack you. And there's somebody with a mirror.
Yeah. I'm gonna give you a little bit. I want to see if you notice something like a subtle change that has been made. Hey, sorry, go ahead.
Come on, it's a subtle change. They're all they're still crabs and cats. I mean, like, I think besides the giant like diamond particle effects that are like all the color of your health bar, like.
Yeah. Yeah, but notice where they're at. They're actually covering the UI.
Oh, yeah. They're a full screen effect. I apologize.
Yeah, no. I mean, I just wanted to see if you noticed it. It's something that like I only noticed it relatively recently, and so it's another SO. Again, we talked about sort of like the parallax effect and like sort of the way in which like layers in the game create a sense of depth. But this is something that I couldn't think of an example of this where the UI or the UI elements actually bleed into the layers of the game map itself. Can you think of another example of that?
Like in Persona? Like Persona 5 particularly?
Oh, that's right. It does do that in Persona.
Yeah, Persona 5 is great. They're like, can you imagine like this amazing UI? I'm like, yeah, Persona 5. Like, I don't even have to know what it is. Like, I can just shout Persona 5. I would say that I think some people in AAA would say a full screen effect that could cover the UI.
Yeah.
Like if you have the red death effects, right? Like in
that's true.
Uncharted or Tomb Raider, right?
Yeah, but the thing is that those death effects are not themselves part of like the landscape of like the play space. They are, I don't know. That strikes me as different because it's like what that's communicating to you is. Oftentimes you see that, especially in like, first-person games, although they do it in third-person as well. But what that's communicating to you is something having to do with like the specific subjectivity of the player character themselves. Whereas in this case, because Iris, who is sort of like the narrative focus of the game, is herself in that game space, then also you have the UI. Okay, I'm circling around to my own argument. In many ways, then then you're right. Then it is actually analogous. But I think it's interesting to me to do that in terms of like something that like a heads-up display that we tend to think of as like abstracted from the play space being like melded into it. But it's actually, I think there's a more powerful argument to be made here, which is that like it's actually showing you that sort of your perspective, which you could easily think is sort of like abstracted from what's going on in the game, is analogous to that of Iris herself. In other words, with all the little like floaty fire particle effects that are coming up around her, you are experiencing the same thing in terms of like how you have to interact with the UI itself, and especially like
it's definitely a deliberate choice, right? Like,
yeah.
I think that deliberate choice is something that's worth to be called out. It's not so much maybe like an argument or like a thesis statement, right?
Yeah.
But it definitely is something where, like, in some indie circles, like you'd call it juice. Like this is a juicy piece, where like the particle effects being both in the foreground and in the background illustrate, right, the struggle that she's seeing and make you realize that like you're seeing what she's seeing.
Yeah.
And I think that would be impactful.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, but I hadn't quite like I clearly hadn't thought it through well enough. All right,
this is awesome because like I've had to play games like this for years, right? Like in order to do my job, I have had to, instead of enjoy a nice, beautiful Assassin's Creed experience, gone in and been like, what does this experience really mean, right?
Yeah.
And I think for you, like it's awesome to see it because you see it most, I think, in indie titles where it's really just one person's thought process and brain throughout an entire experience versus say a AAA or like in a Call of Duty game, right? Or Destiny 2. Like those are great, huge examples where thousands upon thousands of people at any given point in time, right, have worked worked on those titles. And so you're not really seeing like a singular vision executed throughout. You're seeing like lots of visions, right?
Yeah. Well, not just lots of visions, but also like, well, I mean, it can be weird because oftentimes, like, you can even have, you know, a team that say is like working on a particular, because art teams tend to work together, and you know, people who do like say like narrative systems design, they tend to work together, and like that element can have a kind of cohesion to it, but that cohesion can often get muddied by sort of the way in which it isn't quite reflecting other aspects.
Yeah, and I would say that like what I tend to do is a lot more collaborative and interdisciplinary, and I'm super lucky that I'm able to do that.
Yeah.
But in most studios, it's actually much more broken up, right?
Yeah.
Like to where the VFX and the lighter may or may not even talk to each other. They talk to each other through production, right? Production can be like, we're not getting time of day, so the particle effects need to always look like this in this lighting. You need to make a different one for this setting, right? Or something. And likewise, I guess in AAA would be more like, we have time of day, so good luck, VFX artist. You have to make your particle effects appear in bright daylight and at midnight. Which is usually why the moon is just so bright in games, right? Because the particle effect guy eventually is just like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
There's one of me and like several of you. But in terms of Iris and Giant, like, are those sharks? What are those little red things?
Oh, these guys? Okay, so let me...
Now you're getting attacked by sharks?
No, they're not sharks. One of the heads of the terrible Cerberus. The legends say its heads grow back after a while. I will give them a chance. So the way this is set up is you have to kill all three of them in the same turn, or they will revive. And in this instance, they're all armored as well, so I have to like get through their armor first and then kill them all in the same turn. They also do they also do a decent chunk of damage, so that's fun. Let's see. Who do we need to get rid of right away? Oh, we definitely need to get rid of Mr. Kitty up there. So that'll help get through that armor. Man, I just don't have any AoE. So one of the things we could do is we could try to blast through these two and get to the stairs. But I do kind of want to kill Cerberus. So let's think about how we're going to do this. Well, I can keep the other two back for now. And I can start working my way through these guys. Let's see how we're going to go about this. So we're going to kill the archer one. And we're going to knock him down once. Oh crap, I did not see the fire dudes behind. So these guys set your cards on fire as long as they're alive. Playing one of the cards that they mark with this burning logo will do 8 will damage. They're really, really very nasty. So I'm going to kill them first. Actually, let's see what's in here.
I love how you were like, I'm going to do this. Actually...
Actually, no, let me rethink that. No, I do that all the time. Where it's like, oh crap, I should have... So I don't know if you noticed, but when it went into the card selection screen, also the fire particle effects were in the card selection screen as well. And so that's
drawing on top of everything.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know. Like I said, you're right.
That I think super great.
So what we're gonna do is, okay, we're gonna clear these guys to this front row. We're gonna clack through their armor. You're going to use this to heal. Oh, I don't have a way to kill all three of them at once. But, oh, I didn't think that through. That's my bad. And then if I use this, I'm going to take...
I think you did it through. I think that's what's interesting about games like this is where, like, you obviously thought that through, but then you made a mistake, so you're like, oh, I obviously didn't think. And I'm like, don't discredit your past self.
No, it's just I think you know what? I don't want to use this. but I don't think. Well, I currently don't have the means to beat them. But I also won't be able to get to this memory if I don't. What do you think we should do? Do you think we should just skip to the next level, or do you think we should try and get through these guys? Actually, here's what I'll do. I'll get rid of the fire dudes.
Memory gonna have a chance? Like, if you don't get it?
No. Like, on the run, if you skip a memory, you don't get it. So there is like and the memories are what you need to unlock those like really powerful like permanent abilities. So it's almost worth tanking this run in order to get it, which is what I'm gonna do.
Okay.
Oh, we're saved. We got an X. So we can kill all three of them.
Oh my god, totally missed a question here in chat, but it said, can you weaponize the environment a la Iron Brigade?
No.
Okay. No, I'm sorry, I was reading that and I was just watching you play.
So there are AoE abilities. There are bombs. So there's a bomb AoE, there's an axe AoE, and then there's a fire AoE. Let's see. Optimism is not great. Oh man, I'm also just not getting very good power-ups. Alright, hand size. And then this guy we might as well kill because we need to anyway. Alright, so we defeated I keep getting crappy power-ups. That's not terrible. Getting healing from grabbing cards. Alright, other memory, here we go.
I don't know. She doesn't talk to me. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you should be fired.
I want to help her, but
Hey!
I think it's me. I'm the one who's lost.
So there's a subtle hint there in that cutscene of what is actually going on. And so I'm just going to go... So since it's only you and me right now, I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it. So Iris and the Giant, the title of the game. So Iris obviously is this character. And then as we go up a level, we'll see...
I hear the rain in the distance. Or is that the sound of tears falling?
Do you want me to spoil it theoretically?
An old sorrow that
Yeah, go
weighs
ahead.
heavy upon my heart.
The Giant is her stepdad because her mom died or something, right?
Well, no, the Giant just is her dad.
It's just her dad. Did her mom die?
No, her mom's around.
Okay.
Wait,
I was hoping the mom died, because that would have had more gravity to why she really needs to repair the relationship with her father.
Well, again, because I think it's never quite said, but I think the character is like spectrum coded. Like I think she is either... Okay. One of the reasons why this game is sort of powerful emotionally for me is because, I mean, you're familiar with my relationship. I don't want to like explain to everyone what my relationship with my daughter is like, but she can be cagey in this way, and it is extremely frustrating. I mean, I don't necessarily think that I have the problems that Iris and her dad have, and their like complete inability to communicate. But what becomes clear in the sort of the Giant clearly being the father is that Iris's difficulties are clearly a reaction to her own to her father's like inability to deal with his own bullshit.
Ah, right.
And, you know, it has that sort of annoying, like, father-daughter trope that you do see in a lot of games, and so I don't like it for that reason. I do appreciate the fact that it does it in a semi-interesting way, where it's like the game starts off by seeming to be about Iris and, like, being bullied at school and, like, her retreating into her inner world, but it becomes very clear that, like, that retreat is a function of this difficult relationship whose problems are actually being driven by her father.
That's really interesting. I think that's that's the actual read of the game, or is that like your...
Yeah, so like if I play it on easy, I'll be able to get through it pretty quickly. Like on classic, it's kind of hard, especially when I don't have any power-ups. But yeah, no, when you get to the final floor, and it's worth noting that like so the final floor is a fight against the Giant himself, and you don't beat the Giant by attacking him. And in fact, attacking him actually makes your situation worse. Because every time you attack him, he cries and his tears become mobs on the playing field. What you actually have to do is use the same cards that you use to heal yourself, you have to use on the giant. And if you do that the right number of times, then you beat the final level. So there is this sense.
That's cool.
So yeah, so there is built into this the sense that, like, so if you think about the way that allegory sort of works with, like, you know, a child-parent relationship, what it's saying is, like, the only way to sort of like heal the rift between those two generations is for them to literally stop attacking each other and actually try to like work through their shit and try to like heal each other. So that is the fundamentally like underlying metaphor of the game. It's a little heavy-handed, but again, it's the kind of thing that is legible to kids.
It's legible to kids, and it's more that it's a very like simple thing. I think that you're confusing like the fact that it is a very easy allegory to understand with like something that is like childlike or kid or like more accessible, right? Because what I don't want you to think is that like I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want you to think that like because he does that like it's accessible to kids. It's like no, it's more that it's like it's a very simple and like easy to understand like metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Like this is someone who like you would do that literally in a children's book or you do that literally in a novel, right?
Yeah.
But then like how would you do that in a game literally? Well, you would literally say like in order to heal your right communication, you would need to heal the opponent.
Yeah.
And it's not something you would think of in a game because games wouldn't do that, and that's what makes these really cool like experiences very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it's also important because the game doesn't do anything to actually explain that to you. Like the fact that the game like trains you to sort of like you actually have to like delve into it and like figure out like alternative strategies for how to deal with things. Like that in fact is training you for that final level, because at no point in the game has it ever introduced this mechanic where like you heal an enemy to deal with them. But that is what you have to do there. And if you don't figure it out, like you will lose very quickly because like the tears that the giant sheds, like they become overwhelming very quickly. Which is itself
That's what I'm saying, like, is what makes it inaccessible to I think children. Is that like or rather like what I'm trying to say is that in and of itself is an inaccessibility. If you're doing game design and like especially in the AAA space, you could look at a game that actually requires you to heal enemies, which is Divinity 2 Original Sin.
Yeah.
Like if an enemy is decayed or dead or like basically brought back, if you heal them, the only way they get healed is actually if you poison them, right? Because they get healing kills them.
Yeah.
So I think that is more of like the game design, right? It's like, oh, well, here's this system, right? Here's this mechanic and this whole system around something. When you look at something that's a little more simplified like this, it's actually really easy to be like, oh, we don't need to build a system for that because it's a one-off, right? Like it's a single player, like linear one-off experience. So like that's really cool. But that's kind of the way that like you see healing as a mechanic in a bigger game title. Because like every decision is made for a bigger game title, right? And if this was like a maybe bigger title, it would also probably you'd have to heal other enemies right along the way, versus like discovering that you just heal the enemy at the end.
Well, yeah, it's like the Valve theory of tutorials, where they don't actually like do tutorials; they just like build what you're supposed to learn into the narrative itself. So like, you know,
that's how I would put that in. Like I would put in enemies that spawn other enemies, and the only way to get rid of them is to heal them. It's like you're healing yourself. Like that would be like that one next step.
Yeah.
Right. And I hate calling it that, but it's kind of true because like on the one hand you're making like a game, and you're making an experience that is meant to be played once or just regularly enjoyed. Oh my gosh, that chest was a mimic. That was
cool. And we're kind of screwed as a result.
Yeah,
I'm gonna skip.
I would say that there's the And when I call it the one next step, it's like the step from making a game like a linear one-time play experience to something that is a little bit more elegant, is where then you put in the extra system to say, I'm teaching you the metaphors of this game through an interactive experience, right?
Yeah.
Versus, even though you have to heal the giant, that's actually not interactive. That's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
And that's very different.
Yeah, you're right. Because it's things are not being like set up for you in an obvious way. And as a result of that, well, and that's the thing. In fact, in many ways, it's important that it's not that it is a learned behavior and that it's not like just strictly mechanical or interactive, precisely because the sort of the narrative of the game itself is predicated upon this idea that you have to sort of like develop an understanding of other individuals in order to sort of like deal with your own baggage. And again, so that's learning. Like understanding fundamentally comes from learning. Understanding doesn't necessarily come from interaction.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, like, because when you look at it, like, there are many ways to learn, right? There's visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, right? Kinesthetic is just, you need to be able to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I would think that most game designers, right, are probably, people that work in games especially, right, are probably very kinesthetic learners. Like, they need to get into something. I'm a little bit that way, right? Like, but I'm also very, very visual, and I can learn, like, auditorially as well, like, if it's just a lecture.
Yeah.
I can learn all the ways. You know, like picking one way to learn is really hard for me. But that being said, like some people are not visual. Like they cannot visualize. When people say, "Oh, I visualize a maze in my head," they're like, "I know what a maze looks like." So like, if you tell them to visualize it, they'd be like, "It's a maze. It looks like a maze."
So we have a difficult situation here. So this guy right here, these guys who throw boulders, they do a lot of damage. So we gotta kill him. But yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Is like to think about like the different ways in which people learn. We definitely need to heal. Because definitely this game does presume that there is like a way you learn. It's not particularly like ecumenical when it comes to how it approaches like different modes of learning. All right, there is that guy sucks. This guy.
And you way when you get really like games that teach you in a variety of ways is honestly only because like of the diversity of the people that work on it. Like, oh, we need an audio thing here because I like listen to your audio, so I know. Oh, we need like visual prompts here because I need the visuals, etc.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get something like Half-Life because they do audio and they do visuals and they do kinesthetic, right? And they do it in such a way that they all are the same thing. And I think that's what's really to see is that like I think more games are trying to do it all of them. But sometimes you'll see mini tutorial prompts and you'll see like, oh my gosh, the audio on the Destiny 2 chest is just always so loud. Like I end up not being able to find it because like I know it's behind that wall, but how do I get behind the wall? Right?
Yeah.
And so they become disparate because they're made by desperate people. Versus like you have this game that I've been able to recreate in the past decades that we keep referencing because like nobody wants to remake it. I don't know. Like,
well, actually, I mean that is a problem in and of itself. Is that like I think the problem there is that whether or not developers want to admit it, like you do chase trends to a certain extent. Like you're not necessarily trying to not everybody's always trying to make the same game, but you do see sort of like broad sweeping movements of things that like become common for like 8 or 10 years and then they just kind of disappear because sort of like the zeitgeist has moved on. It has nothing to do with whether or not like that was a bad way of doing things. It's more just like people have moved on and that's it.
I don't know if I don't know if that's true though. I think that maybe leadership has moved on. Does that make sense? Like
No, so a book you made me read I recently finished. That's Jason Schreier's Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. And one of the themes that came out of that, particularly with like the indie developers that he talked to, or like not necessarily indie developers, but the developers of smaller, scrappier games, if you will. A common theme that came up is that they were all trying to make the modern version of a game that didn't exist anymore. So in the case of Shovel Knight, they were trying to make like the modern version of what felt like an old Nintendo platformer. Or in the case of Pillars of Eternity, they were trying to make the modern version of like an old isometric RPG like Baldur's Gate. Which, at the point that they made those games, those sorts of things didn't really exist anymore. Or like the guy who made Stardew Valley, he was trying to essentially like remake Harvest Moon. Which even like the
guy that did Undertale like just remade Shin Megami Tensei Persona 2.
Exactly. But I think the important point to note is that I think what was driving their desire to make those sorts of games is because like the industry as a whole had kind of moved on from that and wasn't making those games anymore.
That's why I say leadership. Like, it's not the industry as a whole. Like, you think developers, like, you know what I mean? Like, developers at these large 1,000-person studios, like, are like all agree that like, no, we just can't make Baldur's Gate 3. Like, obviously not, right? Like, I know Baldur's Gate 3 is obviously out in early access right now, but right, somebody's there like, oh, I want to make like, you know, the most amazing Baldur's Gate clone I can make. That's not it. It's not like leadership and like the industry, in high scare quotes here, is thinking about what, I mean, they're either doing one or two things, like they're chasing the trend or they're trying to set a new one, right? So they're not looking to recreate an experience, they're looking to innovate on a new one or invent a new one, right? And I think that's the best way to come out when you kind of stop trying to invent or innovate, like you just start trying to do something. And in doing it, you will create an innovation. Because naturally.
Yeah,
you know?
no, okay, I think you're right. There is a sort of like, there is a top-down quality to those shifts because in all of the examples that I cited, those were not, the people who worked on those games were not people who had been in positions of leadership. Either if like they were already part of a game studio and then left it to make that game, they were generally not in a position of leadership. And then in the case of the guy who made Stardew Valley, like he pretty much taught himself how to make games, and so he definitely wasn't coming out of like a predetermined like top-down system.
Yeah, like what I found with a lot of people, especially if we're interviewing a lot of like people that are just coming out of school and stuff, is, you know, we always ask, what is the game given all the time?
Stop it with your video games, Iris.
What's the game that you would
For heaven's sake, we're in a restaurant.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
Don't you
Some
wanna
people, it's
tell
a
me
very,
about your
very
day?
hard question, and others are like, oh, I would obviously make this game that I really love. Like the crucial ones are the ones that like, well, I really love this game, but I'd rather see it done a little bit like this, and they give you like something that like you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Or go like, wow, like I do like that game, right? But I also really hate that aspect, or I love that aspect. Hey, tell me why.
Yeah.
I think that's where it gets really exciting for me. I kind of like that unknown excitement versus like, I don't know, like versus like trying to recreate an experience. Because I think when I first started, I definitely wanted to recreate an experience.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to create like the Voltage games, but with like a little bit more systems and math, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to create Dragon Age or something, but you know, Greek Age with like Greek philosophers. If you want to make that Greek game, just hit me up.
Yeah.
But like, I think that's what I wanted to do. The more I got into games, the more I realized, man, that's just a small piece of a larger puzzle. What can you do in other games? So, is that the end? Is the giant the end?
The giant is the end. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're moving through a sort of like hell-like or Hades-like world. And it's interesting how you're ascending, because when you, and also I thought this about Hades as well. Well, because in Hades he's actually trying to escape, so it makes sense that like Zagreus is trying to like, you know, move up through Hades. But in this case, you're not really ascending so much as you're sort of like going into. I mean, I think it would have been cooler if the world map was arranged differently. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like if it had been a descent, I think the sort of the visual metaphor would have worked better.
I don't know. I like both. I like both. Like you're technically trying to work up the courage to talk to someone. So.
Yeah.
And these are nacho snakes. They're nachos, and they turn into little cookies.
Yeah. They do turn into little cheeses. And you have to like cut off the head and kill it. It's kind of obnoxious. Especially with a hand like this, it's really obnoxious. Because even the dagger isn't gonna do enough. I mean, I could try to clear through one row and just get out. Except I think I'm gonna be dead next turn. Yeah, because they all do 4. Yeah, I think I mean, I'm surprised that I got this far in this run, because I was going to give up a while back. Ah! Yeah, we're screwed. Well, we made it a lot further that time. Do you want to try an easy run? Oh, actually, we got a lot this time. We found 131 stars. Here's some rewards. So the more stars you find in a run, the more rewards you get. So there's this idea, like what I was saying earlier, there's this snowball effect that you get. Imaginary friends, we got our first imaginary friend, although we can't actually use him yet, which is sort of annoying.
You can't. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
back. I like away for like 3 seconds.
The imaginary friends are weird because like you have to first acquire them, and then you have to do a skill challenge in order to be able to use them. Whereas I would just rather have it so that like when you get it, you just can use them.